Welcome in, guys. Kick off the tip off for another video today about West Virginia football. I feel like we put together another good talking point video to explore both what a potential ceiling season looks like for the Mountaineers this upcoming season, as well as what a floor looks like for this upcoming season. And those who are kind of curious as to what that is, the floor being what we believe is the absolute worst. I don't want to say worst, things can definitely go south, but what we feel was the bottom line of what this season can be. That is your floor, and then the ceiling, obviously the best and everything that we think that this team can accomplish year one under Rich Rodriguez. And of course, before we dive into today's video, make sure if you haven't subscribed to hit that subscribe button. We've been a lot of new people joining, man. We appreciate everybody. Appreciate all the comments, support, man. It means a ton to us. It keeps us going and kind of thinking and creating new ideas. We definitely take a hard look at thumbs up and things like that. So without further ado, man, Noah, go ahead. I'll let you kind of break it down. Let's talk about a floor scenario first.
So, Gage, when you're looking at a floor for this team, the Mountaineers have constructed in the offseason, I'm thinking we're looking at more of a 4-8, 5-7 level team. And there's multiple things that could lead into this season. I personally don't think we're going to have a floor season, but if we were to have a floor season, here are some things I think that would be true. I'll hit on one and then I'll let you volley it back and you give me one of yours, okay? So I think for us to have a floor season, the first thing that will happen is West Virginia won't, establish a starting quarterback early into the season. There'll be question marks, should Nico be starting? Should Henderson be starting? Could Max Brown be starting? If we don't solidify, a starter in those first three games, I think it, kind of rallies questions in the locker room as to who we should look to as the offensive leader. There's multiple and there's different facets of leaders in football. Some are the voice, some show by their play that they're the leader. But we all know in a locker room the quarterback is the guy, right? The offense looks at the quarterback to tell them what we're doing, what do we need to improve on, so on and so forth. So if we don't solidify that QB1 spot early into the season, I think West Virginia could have a lot of questions going into league play. Man, where are we at exactly?
And when you don't establish that quarterback, all you get from is just division, right? You have a division from the fan base. You have 50% saying Nico should be the starter. You have another 50% saying Henderson should be the starter. You have division in the locker room because, once again, if you have this type of season where things aren't going your way and you're rotating quarterbacks, it becomes this thing of, well, half the locker room is, well, if Nico would just play, then, our record is X wins and X losses. Or the other side, hey, if Henderson is our starting quarterback and he plays this game and this game, we win. And it seems more times than not when you have that double quarterback, and maybe I'm wrong, maybe this is some weird case scenario where maybe it does work, but you don't see this happen often and be successful. You have to have the guy, the one quarterback for your team. So a lot of division when you kind of factor in and start talking about the dual quarterback play. So I agree. I think you're right. That is kind of the key point for both the ceiling and the floor is the quarterback play. Obviously the most important position in football. To volley it back to you, let's, staying with the floor, if you have inconsistent quarterback play and you pair it with what could perhaps be a shaky offensive line, you have a recipe for disaster. Now, this fall camp has cleaned up a lot of things that I think Mountaineer fans have questioned about this offensive line with a lot of new, fresh faces. I believe as we kind of did the projected depth chart, maybe that sheet was right, maybe it was wrong. The world may never know. But there was only one returning guy starting there at left tackle, Nick Cray, I think is how you pronounce his last name. But if we have a floor kind of year, it's going to be because of that offensive line just not able to, I don't want to say run the scheme right, but it's just not producing at the level you need to win, not only in the Big 12, but the Rich Rod system. Just a lot of things factor in. Offensive line play is crucial. We all know that. A lot of people take it for granted, but man, when you have extremely good offensive line play, it makes everything in the football world 10 times easier.
Yeah, Gage, I think what really hits on with the offensive line factor, obviously amongst all college football or football in general, we'll go with it. Offensive line is a huge factor, like you said. But when you want to come out and, establish and dominate a running attack like Rich Rod, kind of relies on doing, to establish that run game early, get the tempo up and running. If your offensive line isn't clicking on all cylinders, that's where you start to have questions where a guy like Rich Rod who likes to stay in front of the chains, maybe has some negative plays, and that's where you start to question, okay, what's this offense look like? So to back this back, to hit this back to you, Gage, I think another point is if we get into a slump, whether I'm really hoping that we start, non-conference play rolling really good, maybe possibly 3-0. But if we get caught in a slump, maybe we drop one to Ohio early in the season, and then you drop one to Pitt. If you get into a slump early and it's hard to fight your way back into the win column, right? Because we all know as much as we like to think X's and O's, a lot of this is just momentum. You carry momentum into the next game. So if you would happen to, possibly get into a slump in those first, let's say 6, games 2 through 6, if you get into a slump there, you're going to really, really struggle to get back onto the win column when you get into Big 12 play.
So the slump is what kills and breaks college football teams, specifically now at that mid-major level. We see all the time a common betting trend is just one of those mid-major teams in the Sun Belt, MAC, whatever it is, will fall into this slump. And it goes back to that division point, Noah. We know that when you put so much time, work, and effort into this upcoming season and you lose a game you're not supposed to earlier in the year, we know how things can get. I mean, it can just get shaky from the jump, and you start questioning if everything was worth it, if you're in the right spot, if the coaches know what they're doing. That's why it's so crucial to get off to those hot starts, because it builds not only that momentum, but the confidence as the season grows. And of course, when you're flowing and everything is going well from a confidence standpoint, it's going to leak onto the field, and you're going to feel like you're Superman and you can beat Alabama and any SEC team that rolls in front of you. Hope that's the case one day. I don't know about this year, but yeah, I agree with you in the slump aspect of things. And to pivot off that, something similar that you can't really predict, right? Maybe you can predict a slump. It's easier to do in baseball than football, but this is something you can't predict, but we have to kind of talk about it because it is common nature in football. What happens if we come across a major injury, right? I wish that on absolutely nobody, but if somehow, some way we come across a major injury to our Jaheim White in an already kind of depleted RB room headed into the season, or a quarterback, something like that, it's just kind of, that would obviously factor into a year that you're not expected to have. And obviously that's not the case, and we would never want that, but you kind of have to bring it up. And then I'll also say the waiver issues that they're kind of dealing with, Noah. Jamori Robinson, a lot of these guys we still haven't heard a ton about. We know that it went to court, but we haven't heard anything kind of since then. So those guys still away from the team, kind of practicing on their own, doing their own work. But I mean, man, Jamori Robinson still not on the practice field, things like that. That's definitely hurting that defense, because he's one of the guys that we're expecting to be a staple on that defensive line and kind of anchoring down that edge as a pass rusher.
Yeah, Gage, I'm hoping to hear more on that. I believe it's supposed to hit the courts, actually get in front of the judge tomorrow for him to make a ruling one way or the other. So I'm really hoping we get that for, kind of waiver wire news. I guess we'll talk about it kind of NFL-y, but just to see if these guys are going to get eligibility. I really agree with the injury bug too, especially when you don't, not saying that we don't have a prominent guy at any position, but we do have guys that we look at and we say, okay, this should be a standout. This should be one of our studs. If one of those guys were to be injured, and we're not going to list any names at all because we don't want that to happen, right? But if one of these guys were to be injured, what does the season look like in the stance of, oh, we don't have one of our guys, right? Another thing I think to hit on too is I think there's a lot of pressure on Zach Alley to perform early and kind of let the offense hit. So with that pressure, if he would happen to underperform, if his defensive stack would happen to underperform, you might be looking at things and like, man, we're in games where we have to score the ball more than we should, right? Unfortunately, we all know that as much as we love and put this team, we put this team together with thoughtfulness in our minds, trying to get the best players available that fit our scheme. With a scheme as kind of like strategic as what Zach Alley has, do we have the right cats in the right position to play, the style of defense he wants? Especially, kind of hitting on your waiver thing. If Jamori Robinson isn't able to come off the edge, how much does that affect our pass rush? And what does that make our season, look like defensively?
Yeah, for sure, man. And that's kind of the thing, right? I think if the Zach Alley first year doesn't go necessarily as planned, I think it comes back to this. He obviously plays and talks about a ton the style of defense he likes to play. Very blitz happy, likes to bring pressure from a lot of different angles, switching up the defense from multiple formations, things of that nature, which we've talked about before. It's okay if you're if you want to give up some chunk plays, right? Like let's say you're blitzing in a certain game and it's just not getting home a ton and you're giving up, chunk play after chunk play in the drive. It's okay if you can force that turnover, right? If you can force that fumble, if you can get that crucial interception to get the ball back to the offense and Rich Rodriguez. Nobody's going to bat an eye. Like I said, if you're going to attempt to give Rich Rod another possession, one out of every three, defensive drives. Hey, we're going for the big play. I have no problem with that. The question is when that pressure isn't getting home and things aren't going to plan, how does he pivot on the defensive side of the ball and say, okay, hey, this is how we're going to kind of stop the bleeding. This is how we're going to slow the game down on the defensive side of the ball, not stop being aggressive. When I kind of say that, it sounds like I'm saying take the foot off the pedal, don't blitz, things like that. But he has to be able to kind of pivot to another kind of situation of like, hey, we just need to control this game from the defensive side of the ball to give Rich and that offense a chance to, if we're behind, stay in the game, or if it's a close game, which let's be honest, feels like a lot of Big 12 games more times than not, going into that fourth quarter is a 7-point or less game. So that fourth quarter is always crucial in the Big 12 and in football in general, but more times than not, that Big 12. And you got to rely on that defense heavily. So a lot of times I would look in that second half to maybe see him kind of switch from that aggressive style nature of blitz to maybe, hey, let's kind of throw in some disguised zone coverage, some disguised defensive looks, and kind of just manage some control here, depending on the situation in the game. So I definitely agree. You have any other kind of situations that you want to talk about for the floor? I think you and I are kind of spot on about both record and the details that follow. You had 4-8, 5-7. I was 5-7 when you kind of go through the schedule.
Yeah, Gage, I think the only thing is for West Virginia fans to kind of key in on, we all have, very, very, optimistic feelings about the season. Rich Rod's back in town, right? But when you're going to start to notice when you're going to kind of hit with the eye opener is if in these first two, games, we got Robert Morris in Ohio, if those are very, very close games, then you're going to have to start looking at saying, okay, let's kind of take it back a little bit and realize this is Rich Rod's first season. Like he has some time to get things together. I don't think this will happen, but if you play in very close games at the beginning of the season, I think that's going to have, some question marks.
Yeah, I agree. It's kind of like when West Virginia basketball, I can't remember how many years ago it was, but they lost to a mid-major school. I want to say it was like Manhattan or something, maybe like I can't remember who exactly it was, but it kind of just derailed the season before it even started. It's like we lost to them at home. It's like, holy smokes, man. I don't think it's Manhattan. I'll have to double check and throw it up on the screen, but yeah, that game I was like, wait, what? But yeah. All right, man, let's flip over. We got all the negative stuff out of the way. Yeah, let's get positive, kind of what we're here to talk about. And more realistically in a 50-50 split, we favor this 50 side more. We think this is more of like a 60-40, 70-30% split. We lean towards the ceiling scenario for West Virginia football this upcoming season. And let's go right back to the quarterback room, Noah, where you and I both kind of agree. If you hit this ceiling mark in your season, it means that Nico or Henderson plays past their peak. And when I say plays past their peak, it means that we're going to see not only their best statistical year in terms of passing touchdowns, rushing yards, passing, everything. That'll kind of be easy to do because both guys have kind of played in minimal time, things like that. But it means that you can vividly see on the field that these guys are elevating the entire offense, okay? They're able to control the tempo. They're able to think, a big thing of being a quarterback for Rich Rodriguez and a quarterback for any college football team, you have to almost think like the offensive coordinator, the head coach, whoever's calling the plays does, right? You have to be in that same headspace to be like, okay, this is the play, this is what they're coming out in. If this is the look, we check to this, things like that. So one of those guys to not only play past their peak physically in terms of stats, things like that, but mentally to be able to grasp and understand this scheme and offense from a full standpoint. And unfortunately, this does mean that one of these guys is going to pull away from the other, whoever it is, and we roll with one of these guys.
Yeah, I think we need to know by week 3, Gates. I think we've hit on this a couple times, but by week 3, when Pitt rolls into town, we have to know who that starting quarterback is. Because in the sense of football, I kind of really believe in the saying, if you have 2 quarterbacks, you have no quarterback, right? So I think the guys, the locker room, everybody in general needs to be able to look at the guy and know that he's the guy and have the confidence. Not saying you can't have confidence in the backup quarterback. I really would. In this situation where you have Nico and Henderson both dueling it out in practice for these, I'm very confident in both guys. And whoever Rich Rod decides, I'll be happy with. But everybody needs to rally behind one guy, and he needs to be established in the locker room and say, okay, this is the guy, give him the keys.
For sure, my man. And I forgot to state, I think the ceiling record for us, for me at least, my prediction, our best case scenario is 9-3. I think that's kind of right where we are, with a couple games, in the 3 losses that could obviously be switched to wins to reach that double digit mark. But it's key to remember that 9 wins, compared to the floor scenario where I had 5-7, you were the same, and you would miss a bowl game in the first year. We didn't even talk about that, which I think a lot of fans, would be happy, obviously, with a bowl appearance in the first year of Rich Rodriguez, but we kind of shooting a little bit higher than that. So back to the flip side of things. I think this is obviously a no-brainer, but we still have to talk about it. The offense goes as Jaheim White goes, right? But I'm going to look at it from the aspect of, I think if this season is going to be as special as we think it will be, Jaheim White stamps himself as a round 2 to 3 NFL caliber running back in this upcoming season. I think he has every tool in the box to be able to reach that mark, right? You think back to last season at Jacksonville State, what Trey Stewart was able to do in this offense with the volume, touches, everything that he had. I think Jaheim White, if he manages, it doesn't even have to be that full volume mark. We know that he split carries with C.J. Donaldson, his entire time here at West Virginia. He's so explosive, man. I wouldn't be surprised if he really has a really, really good season to see his yards per carry at or around like an 8 to 9 yard per carry mark. With the volume that he have, NFL scouts would be on that all day long. And I think if he solidifies and stamps himself as an NFL draft pick in that 2nd to 3rd round, first round is kind of steep. I mean, we're pretty realistic. We know that those first round kind of guys are the workhorse, Genties and Jeremiah Love, it seems like, is kind of being mocked right now as a first round running back from Notre Dame. But Jaheim White's 2nd round, I could see that definitely being kind of like his top of the line. And obviously, I wouldn't be opposed to him going in the first round. But
yeah, Gage, I think if you look at what Jaheim White's able to do and what he's capable of when he's at peak performance, he's electric. He can completely change a game. He can it can be a 0-0 game late in the first quarter and he breaks one off 70 yards down the sidelines. And that's what Jaheim White gives you the ability to do. For West Virginia to be, at that ceiling potential, he has to have multiple games, I would say, over the 100-yard rushing mark. And I think he'll be able to do that, honestly, but I think that's something that definitely needs to happen.
It goes back to where we compared West Virginia as this year's Arizona State, right? You saw how much they leaned on Cam Scadaboo and the numbers and statistics that he had week by week. I think we could see very similar stuff here for Jaheim White. It wouldn't surprise me, when he rattles off kind of 5 or 6 weeks in a row where he has over 100 rushing yards and a touchdown in most of those games. I could see, by Big 12, like Utah or whoever that Big 12 opponent is after that, anytime touchdown odds for Jaheim White is like -180, -200. I could definitely see that.
Yeah, I could definitely see that, Gage. Rolling into, more of the ceiling scenario there, I think, kind of not trying to rinse and repeat the floor, but Zach Alley, I'm not saying he has to be, shutout worthy in the first couple weeks of this season. I'm not saying that, because in this defense, unfortunately, you're going to let up some points here and there because of the risk you're going to take. But what I think he has to do is allow the offense to catch rhythm, right? Because until Rich Rod always says it, until the offense is live and they're able to kind of get the rhythm, get the carries, the backs getting a groove, linemen are working together, receivers are on time with their routes. Until they're able to get that solidified, Zach Alley has to be able to get the offense some extra possessions, right? And additionally, what he has to do is keep the offense in the game. Don't make them feel like they're down by 3 touchdowns, 2 touchdowns to start the game. If he can keep it within 1 score, or hopefully it's a field goal, that's the most deficit we're ever at, right? Let's hope. But in that sense, if he can keep the offense in the game, keep them, keep the momentum, keep them a little bit of air on that sidelines at all times, that will help West Virginia tremendously all season.
I'm not going to beat a dead horse. I think you said it best about the defense. I think about 2 things, right? One being, I think those first 2 weeks are crucial for him to kind of find his flow and the specific style of defense that he wants to play. I think those 2 weeks he'll be able to kind of pinpoint where he likes certain guys in certain formations, certain plays, packages, things like that. So I think he'll definitely, those first 2 weeks are crucial for him to kind of put a staple and stamp of approval on a lot of positions where guys will be. Because we'll see some rotation on that defensive side of the ball too in certain positions. One position group that I don't think we'll see a lot of rotation, because I think it is going to be much improved and way better this year, is that secondary, specifically the cornerback room. And I think that's kind of the one talking point I'll say about the defense is I think that's got to kind of be the leader on the defensive side of the ball. And I'll include Fred Perry in there at the safety hybrid nickel position, all the above. But Michael Coach Jr. and kind of everybody else in that corner room, I'm not going to run down the list, but a lot of good players in there, man. A lot of guys who are hungry and ready to kind of, hey, make a name for themselves here at that Power 4 level. And I think that this is a perfect year, a perfect opportunity to do so and kind of revamp that secondary, which has to happen if we're going to be successful. And final thing for me, and obviously, you got one more. I think for us to hit the ceiling, the fans fully have to be bought back into the hype. And this obviously comes into play with wins. And let's be kind of serious, Noah. You win those 2 games, obviously, versus Robert Morris in Ohio. You win the big game versus Pitt. You have fans' full attention going into the rest of the season. You win that game versus Pitt, you have a lot of people it doesn't matter how Pitt looks, right? We kind of speculating here. Pitt maybe not looking as good right now as what West Virginia is, I don't know, but you win that game, you get a lot of the kind of West Virginia fan base back on board no matter what. You know what I mean? So I think the fan aspect is really crucial. You got to have people, both adults and students, ready to show up, drink some beer, tailgate, scream their head off for the Mountaineers. That's when things are peak, man. That's when Morgantown is Morgantown. That's when High Street's bumping. That's when everything. When football's good, man, life in Morgantown is good, in the state in general. Let's be honest. That's kind of how it is. That's why we sit here and relive on glory days time and time again, because that's when life was really good.
Yeah, Gage, I think to hit on that exactly where you're going with it is, if West Virginia is to get back to peak West Virginia football, the fans have to buy in, and the players aren't going to realize that they're playing for the whole entire state until Milan Pushker is rocking on week 3. We're 2-0, headed into Pitt, the backyard brawl week, and then they're going to realize that, oh shit, everybody here in this state that cares about this, and plus however many thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions, however many it may be, are watching on their televisions, they're not going to realize that they are playing for this whole state when they strap up on Saturdays, So just simple as that. I think another thing for me to hit on here, for Rich Rod to have the explosive offense that he does, I think we need a receiver to break out. He keeps hitting on the slot receiver guys, which I'm very, very interested to see how he's going to use them. But I love Cam Vaughn. I think he's an amazing receiver. But I don't know. I just have this feeling, and you've been kind of talking. I think maybe you're kind of convincing me. Jaden Bray. I just feel like he has a breakout season, and that's why I feel like I'm closer to that ceiling scenario than floor scenario, because if Jaden Bray, whether it be Jaden Bray, Cam Vaughn, Roddy Gallagher, whoever it may be, one of those guys has a huge, huge season, that allows what West Virginia's offense and Rich Rod's offense and how he likes to run it in general become way, way, way more explosive, and they're not one-dimensional anymore.
He's just so smooth, bro. It's so smooth as a receiver to not kind of put up the stats that he wants so far in his college career. And I hope it really comes together for him this year, because the talent and everything is there. I think he's a really good player. And that's, if he kind of stamps himself as that wide receiver too, like you said, it opens up that slot position to a lot of those guys where we can kind of plug and play for certain situations and scenarios, and a lot of guys more than capable, which I feel kind of comfortable saying that about the wide receiver room. So it'll be interesting to see. Kind of one of the bigger question marks heading into the year outside of Cam Vaughn is that wide receiver room. So, Noah, I want you to kind of explain real quick, as we got football this week, man. We got week 0 Saturday. Finally, it's been a long ride, but we finally made it, man. We're here. With that being said, before we get into the question of the day, I kind of want you to give the fans a breakdown and a run through of what kind of our normal content schedule will be for West Virginia as they prepare, obviously, for the 30th, and kind of the routine that we'll get in and what they can expect.
Yeah, just so you guys, the watchers, viewers out there, subscribers, kind of understand when to look for videos, when they're going to be out, so on and so forth. We kind of set up a little bit of a schedule. We're going to try and stick to this schedule as much as we can, to a T. Obviously, some things pop up, might be a little bit difficult at some points, but just to get into it, Tuesday nights, we're hoping to release videos, kind of just an overview of what's happening in the Big 12, Gage. Kind of go over, maybe big games in the Big 12 or a team that lost and or won. That was kind of big news. And then just a small look up into West Virginia's matchup against the opposing team the next week. On Thursday nights, right? Kind of like a Thursday night film review. Gage and I are going to watch film on the opposing team. The Mountaineers are going to play the following Saturday. And we're going to let you know everything you need to know, whether it be player, what concerns us about the matchup. What do we think West Virginia will be able to, be successful at in the game, and how they're going to win the game, like kind of keys to victory in that game. And then Sunday, hopefully Sunday mornings before NFL football action, while you guys are waiting on probably the Steelers. If you're watching this, hope not a Steelers fan here. But if you are a Steelers fan watching the Steelers on Sunday, we're going to recap, and hopefully it's going to be recapping a Mountaineer victory. But if not, Gage, we're just going to recap what happened in the game, what went right, what went wrong, things to fix, things that we're, really, really glad to see. Maybe kind of a breakout player segment there, just rolling into exactly the next week, where we'll, again, cover Tuesday, Big 12, and so on and so forth, Gage.
Yes, sir. The full shebang, and we'll kind of get into that routine. And obviously, days subject to change. Life gets in the way. Life happens. Things of that nature. But for the question of the day, now it kind of got me thinking. Obviously, week 0, first game of the college football season is Kansas State versus Iowa State, 2 Big 12 teams. So let's live in a hypothetical world where West Virginia is the opening game. All eyes, everybody who's been waiting for college football and football in general is watching this first game. What is your dream matchup that you would pick, and you are not allowed to pick Pitt?
And Gage, are we going like any overseas, how it usually is? Where
Ireland, overseas in Ireland.
Ireland.
Yes, which by the way, Ireland, if Morgantown, if like that place would get rocked. I'm telling you right now, if people from West Virginia traveled to Ireland for that game, Guinness would be sold out. Guinness would be sold out.
Pat McAfee would be joining us.
Oh my gosh.
So Gage, I'm actually going to go with this, and especially because of the team, West Virginia versus Notre Dame. Does it not sound amazing? It just can't. I like it. I don't know why.
Yeah.
I don't know why I like that. There's some history in that game there, but I really do like West Virginia versus Notre Dame. We're going to Dublin. We're in Ireland, the Fighting Irish, right? I really like that situation. How that would unfold. You got one for you?
This versus Notre Dame, that would be like this year would be a very tough game. You get into like you get into like year 2, 3 of this new Rich Rod era. It'd be interesting to see what his team looks like versus Notre Dame 2 to 3 years from now. That would be an interesting game. This year, I would be curious to see what the spread would be for that.
Yeah.
It's funny, Noah. I was like, the first team that came to my mind when I was thinking about it is Marshall, but because of all the shit they've been talking recently on Twitter and things like that. But it's like, why should we go overseas to embarrass them? Like, we could just do that at a neutral ground somewhere, like for everybody to watch in the state. Yeah, you're right. I don't know. Like, I was kind of leaning on one of those like old Big East matchups. The problem is, Miami, just something with a little bit of nostalgia. I think I kind of would lean Miami because I was trying to think of teams right now that are kind of relevant from that Big East era in college football. And I'm sure I'm missing a couple teams that are, ranked and still good. But I'll stick with Miami for now. I kind of like that. That would be a fun game, too. I know first game last year, Miami destroyed Florida. But, they had Cam Ward, and more times than not, it feels like you would get a quarterback from Miami and a quarterback from West Virginia on somewhat of an equal playing field. So I feel like that would be a pretty good game to watch. But Noah, I'm good, man. I feel like this is a really good video. If you want to kind of wrap things up, anything else, kind of last thoughts?
Gage, I have a couple last thoughts here. And I just think before the football season starts, and next week, obviously, we're going to break down into our stuff. A couple things I want to hit on is like West Virginia University, the Mountaineers need to be in meaningful football games again. The state needs it. The community needs it. Fans need it. We need to be relevant again in the national spotlight. I think I saw a poll. We haven't been ranked in the AP top 25 since 2019, I believe. So I'll hit on that one there. Um, Secondly, Rich Rod created a brand once here in Morgantown. He created a brand in Morgantown. He not saying he made the Mountaineers, because we all know Don Nealon was a huge part in it, but he created a brand that needs to be established again in Morgantown. And as much as we all want a Big 12 title, I'm not saying it's impossible that we win a Big 12 title, but we need to realize this season is a building block, right? A building block for what we want to be an upward trajectory, right? We just want this program to be what it was and know that, we can be in the top 10 AP. It's not impossible. It can happen. We need that back in Morgantown, and I think that's what Rich Rod's going to bring back to us.
Well said, my friend. And if Rich Rod ever wants to finally get on kind of the apparel side of things, I would love a shirt that says "Plant the Roots, Pull the Weeds." I think that was one of his nice things that he had. So I'm ready to kind of debut a shirt, Rich Rod, if you want to send us some stuff. But hey, we appreciate you guys watching as always. I know we talked about football and we're getting in the flow of things, but definitely want to kind of get a basketball video up and coming here soon, kind of before football season really starts to roll. A lot of good things happening over there with Ross Hodge, obviously finalized the roster with another player, things like that. If you're looking for more on that, highly recommend you head over to Locked On West Virginia. Paul does great work over there with a bunch of the recruits for both football and basketball, and a bunch of those guys, Coos Corner, Country Roads Webcast, shouting out all the guys, man. We appreciate all the love from everybody, and we'll see you in the next one, man. Appreciate you guys watching.